What if the brain you have right now is not the brain you will have in a year? Not metaphorically, physically, different connections, different strengths, different wiring. Most people assume the brain is mostly fixed. You are born with a certain personality, certain habits, certain abilities, and those things simply stay the same. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Your brain is not fixed. It is constantly changing, rewiring, strengthening some connections, weakening others, every day. This ability of the brain to change its own structure is called neuroplasticity. The word sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. Neuro means brain. Plasticity means the ability to change shape. So neuroplasticity simply means this: the brain can reorganize itself. It can form new connections, and it can strengthen or weaken existing ones. Your brain is not a finished structure. It is more like an ongoing construction project. Always adjusting, always updating, based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. But here is where things get interesting. The brain does not change randomly. It changes according to use. Connections that get used often become stronger. Connections that are rarely used begin to weaken. In neuroscience, there is a famous phrase that summarizes this idea. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Let's unpack that. Your brain is made up of billions of cells called neurons. These neurons communicate with each other using electrical signals. When two neurons activate at the same time, their connection becomes stronger. The brain essentially says, these two things keep happening together, so they must be important, and it reinforces the pathway. Imagine walking through a grassy field. The first time you walk across it, you barely leave a mark. But if you walk the exact same path every day, the grass slowly flattens. A visible trail begins to form. Walk that path long enough, and it becomes the easiest route to follow. Your brain works in a similar way. Every repeated thought, every repeated action, every repeated emotional reaction creates a pathway. At first, the pathway is weak. It takes effort to follow it, but with repetition, the pathway becomes easier, faster, more automatic. Eventually, it becomes the brain's default route. This is the biological foundation behind learning. It is also the foundation behind habits. But something else is happening beneath the surface. Neuroplasticity does not just change what you know, it changes how your brain is physically wired. When a connection strengthens, more receptors form between neurons. Signals travel more efficiently. The pathway becomes easier to activate. At the same time, unused connections begin to shrink. The brain removes pathways it no longer needs. This process is called synaptic pruning. Think of it like cleaning up unused roads. If a path is never traveled, nature slowly erases it. Your brain is constantly making similar decisions. Which pathway should be strengthened? Which pathway should be removed? And the deciding factor is repetition. Here is where the concept becomes very practical. Everything you repeatedly do is shaping your brain, not symbolically, physically. If you practice playing piano every day, the brain strengthens the circuits responsible for those movements. If you repeatedly solve math problems, the circuits involved in logical reasoning become more efficient. If you practice speaking a new language, language networks expand and strengthen. But neuroplasticity does not only apply to useful skills, it also applies to behaviors that happen automatically, habits, reactions, thought patterns. If someone repeatedly checks their phone every few minutes, the brain strengthens the urge to check. If someone frequently worries about worst-case scenarios, the brain strengthens the anxiety pathway. If someone regularly avoids uncomfortable tasks, the brain strengthens the avoidance response. Over time, these responses become automatic, not because the person lacks discipline, but because the brain has built a very efficient pathway. This is the part most people misunderstand. Habits are not just psychological, they are neurological. They exist as physical patterns of wiring inside the brain, which means changing a habit is not simply about deciding differently. It is about building a new pathway and weakening the old one. This takes time because the brain prefers efficiency. If a pathway has been used for years, it becomes very strong. The signal travels quickly and easily. A new pathway starts weak. It requires conscious effort to activate, but repetition slowly changes that balance. Each time the new behavior is repeated, the pathway becomes slightly stronger, and the old pathway becomes slightly weaker. Over weeks or months, the brain reorganizes itself. What once felt difficult begins to feel natural. This is neuroplasticity in action. But there is another layer that makes this system even more interesting: attention. Your brain changes faster when you are paying focused attention, when something matters to you. The brain releases chemicals that support learning, chemicals like dopamine and acetylcholine. These chemicals signal to the brain, "This information is important, strengthen these connections." That is why emotionally meaningful experiences are easier to remember, and why focused practice produces faster improvement than passive repetition. Simply repeating something while distracted produces weaker plastic changes, but practicing with full attention accelerates the process. Sleep also plays a critical role. While you sleep, the brain replays patterns of activity from the day. It strengthens important connections and stabilizes newly learned pathways. In other words, part of learning happens while you are asleep. Without sleep, plasticity becomes much less effective. So neuroplasticity depends on several conditions: repetition, focused attention, emotional relevance, and proper recovery. Together, these conditions allow the brain to rewire itself. Now this leads to an important realization. Your daily experiences are not just passing moments. They are training sessions for your brain. Every time you repeat a behavior, you are casting a vote for a particular neural pathway. Every time you practice a skill, you are strengthening a circuit. Every time you reinforce a reaction, you are making that reaction easier to trigger. Your brain is constantly adapting to your patterns, which means your future behavior is heavily influenced by what you repeat today. This does not mean change happens instantly. Plasticity is gradual, but it is persistent. Small repetitions accumulate. Connections strengthen slowly, and eventually, the brain becomes different. A new skill becomes automatic. A new habit becomes natural. A new pattern becomes the brain's default. And this leads to a subtle but powerful shift in perspective. If the brain changes according to repeated experience, then who you become is strongly shaped by what you repeatedly do. Not just once, but consistently. Neuroplasticity is the biological reason learning is possible. It is also the biological reason habits form. It explains why practice works, why repetition matters, and why behavior tends to follow familiar pathways. But it also raises an important question. If repeated actions shape the brain, how do those actions become automatic in the first place? Why do certain behaviors run almost without thinking? To answer that, we need to understand how habits form inside the brain, and that is exactly what we will explore in the next video.